Welcome to Magic.ai, the operating system for hospitality. At Magic, we know an operating system is more than just software and systems. It's about people, because hospitality is nothing without them. So supporting the hospitality community is our number one goal.
I think there needs to be more of a support system. Like, you have to love this business and you have to love every aspect of it, including sharing tribal knowledge on what is successful and also tribal knowledge of what is a failure.
Founded by lifelong experts, we're building the place where everyone in hospitality, from seasoned pros to first-timers, can gather, share, and grow together. Plus, we're crafting scalable tools and AI-supported software to boost your business. Dive into our vibrant community platform packed with meaningful conversations and robust tools and templates designed just for you. Need more? Our custom software solutions have got you covered. From recruiting and staffing to digital playbooks and dashboards, we're working on building a unique hub of resources unlike any other. Magic is your single point of origin for important conversations, accessible tools, valuable insights, and more. Join us at magic.ai. The evolution of hospitality is here.
Your orbit is no longer around you. Your orbit is no longer around one physical place. Your orbit is now all of these people who work for you in all of these places. They are the extensions of what you care about and what your ethos is. And I think that that's become really hard to dial in and then to get right, but it also provides this amazing opportunity where people are making memories at your places that you might never meet.
Will Gilson is the chef and partner of Cambridge Street Hospitality Group, located in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The restaurants in the group are Puritan and Company, Puritan Oyster Bar, Geppetto, The Lexington, Cafe Beatrice, Amba, the Herb Lyceum, and First Street Market. When Will isn't running restaurants, his life is being run by his wife Molly and his two little girls, Bee and Lila, and a never-ending list of home projects.
I think the thing that has been actually the hardest, though, is menu writing, because all of these things were my ideas. And I say that knowing the good and the bad, of owning that. Every single restaurant that we've opened was an idea of mine, and that's good and bad.
You had a restaurant burn down 10 days ago. And it wasn't just any restaurant. I think it's fair to say that it was a place that you grew up, and it was a place that you kind of learned where hospitality was where you wanted to be. It's a family home. It is an event space, and it has functioned as really kind of the portal for you to get into this business. I'd love you to just talk a little bit about what happened, but more, I think, importantly, what this place means to you and why, and where to go from here.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that's the hardest about, when you lose a business is that it's not just a business. Everybody looks at, it's hard. The diners oftentimes look at restaurants as like, oh, these people must be raking it in because this is how much money it cost me to dine there per person or whatever it might be. And everybody kind of boils down all of the hard work and sacrifice, all the memories, all of the good and bad decisions into just how much their guest check costs and whether or not they enjoyed the food and service. And I think that that's hard when you take something that's like this business that just burned down was 30 years old.
Yeah, give people some context of what this building and this land meant to you, means to you.
What we lost was, an evolution of sort of my family and then the business that we were in. So, the building that burned was called the Herb Lyceum, and in 1990, I think, my dad renovated the barn that was on our property that had chickens and, horses and cattle and stuff coming in and out of it, into a place that could be an educational center for teaching people about the agriculture that we grew here, which was potted herbs. And so it became this place that had like antique stoves in it and like a a slate sink, and like he put all this history into it. He found like barn boards from the town, and I mean, my family's been in this town for 350 years, the town of Groton, and so he wanted history and like sort of this sentimental aspect of everything. And it was an absolute nightmare kitchen to cook in at that time because no exhaust hoods, like
Not set up for it.
a household dishwasher that took like 2 hours per cycle and inefficiently. But what ended up happening was the teaching aspect of it only went so far, and time goes on. My parents get divorced. I stay at this property with my dad, and he's like, "Well, what do you want to do with it?" And at the time, I was cooking in Boston, working in restaurants, first getting my teeth cut in this industry. And he's like, "Well, why don't you try doing a dinner here on the weekend?" And that first dinner I did was,
How old were you?
16.
16 years old.
16 years old, and we invited, like, I think the first dinner was like 15 or 20 people that showed up, and I think we charged $25 a person, at that time. I mean, that's like,
So
like
you
my
weren't even really line cooking then. You were probably
no.
prep cooking and right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had no business doing what I was doing here, but it was here, and it in ways it saved it. I mean, after my parents got divorced, there was a bank foreclosure that was going to happen on the property, and we started doing these dinners and investing in it, and that became a way to generate revenue off of a farm in the middle of the winter when you don't make any money off of a farm. And so that became a conduit for us to basically save it, once. And that evolved over time. I mean, I spent other than when I was cooking in Europe, during the 4 years that I went to Johnson & Wales, I came back here every single weekend, and it was basically like a test kitchen. Like, I would have these people that would sign up for these dinners, and I would take whatever I learned at school, whatever I had been reading about, and I would bring it back here and I would try it out. And I'm sure I made tons of mistakes. I'm sure I made some pretty bad meals, but people kept coming. I think there was a novelty to the fact that there was this high school, college age kid that was like coming into this space and, turning it into something. And it also was the first time that I learned how to deal with like people telling you that what you're making sucks. I mean, there's a developmental part of that I think so few people understand. They go to culinary school, they go, work in one restaurant, or maybe they become a home cook and they get excited about it. And the first time it's live and you're cooking for people and they're like, "This isn't good," or "I don't want to pay for this," or "You don't understand my allergy," or "You don't understand, this has been taking too long. I didn't know what I was walking into. Someone just said I should go to this place." And, that was harder for my dad to kind of see because he felt like he was protecting his son. But for me, I was like, even if I was getting reactionary to it, like, I wouldn't trade that for the world. I mean, that was the stuff that prepared me for it.
But you had a really unique opportunity in that place because you all of a sudden were given a platform that 99.9% of people don't have, which was to have product right outside your back door, to be kind of cooking iteratively and working things out in the moment in a way that you wanted to. And it was all happening at like such a young age. I can't imagine that, like, without Herb Lyceum in your life as a kid, you would have been as, kind of inspired and driven to want to be able to be in this industry long term, right?
I would say that I would not have the career that I have today, and I would not have the business acumen that I have today to have the restaurants that we have in our group if it were not for this place. I mean, that's a fact. I mean, I got a full ride scholarship to Johnson & Wales because of this place.
Yep.
Like, a woman who dined here wanted to film a documentary, and she filmed a documentary about me cooking here, and we sent that tape only to Johnson & Wales. And she got her A at Emerson for doing her videography, and I got a full ride scholarship to Johnson & Wales.
That's amazing.
And like that, it all came from here.
Yep. So there's so many layers there, professionally, but personally too, right? And And now you're in a place where obviously the last 10 days have been a sea change in so many ways. I can't imagine, obviously, the emotions that are going through you and through your dad and through folks who've given their hard work at the Lyceum. But, what, I guess, what happened?
Yeah. So, one of the things that's been the biggest transition out here is I had my wedding here. I mean, you were at it. And that wedding, it changed the paradigm of like what could be earned out here. As we just kind of saw it as like, well, geez, if we could throw a wedding out here that was that awesome, like, then maybe we could just turn that into like a business. And it got the grind because like every dinner, I mean, 30 people, even at like $100 a head. I mean, what are you bringing in? $3,000 to do a dinner. I mean, you can't support a staff on that. You can't, figure out a way to scale that. And so we had these beautiful grounds, and we said, let's just invest in weddings. Let's try to, for better lack of a term, take the show on the road, and we did, and so we had completely transitioned into that. And of course, the first season that we tried to do that was COVID, and then you do 4 micro weddings at 20 people each wedding, and you're like, that now this entire model is fucked. But what ended up coming out of that was that there was a backlog of people who wanted these outdoor beautiful farm weddings, and so experiences. And we had people who had worked for us at our other restaurants that like wanted to be a part of it. And all of a sudden 2021, boom, it turns into this thing where it was like when the printer's unplugged and then you plug it back in and all the kitchen tickets start printing again. Like it was that many inquiries.
Never been there. Don't know what you're talking
exactly.
about.
No one has ever experienced that in the restaurant business. And so then we just were like catching these weddings and developing it. And so, we had really, this is the most profitable part of our business out here. Of all of the restaurants that we own, this is the place that drove the most to the bottom line. So we were in the middle of wedding season. It's super quiet in July and August as people don't really want to get married because they're afraid of the heat. So like September and October become the prime months. And I mean, I shit you not, dude, it burned September 1st. Like the day of the start of big wedding season. We had finished up one wedding on August 31st, if that's how months work. And we had finished up that wedding. All staff had gotten out of the building, locked up, turned the kitchen off, turned everything off by 11 p.m. midnight. And then my dad, who had turned my childhood home into a bed and breakfast to catch some of these, like, people who were, coming to weddings here and looking for a place to stay. Somebody who was staying here called the fire department at 4 a.m. and said the building's on fire. And I get a phone call at 6:30 in the morning from my dad saying, the Lyceum's on fire. I got in my car. I drove 100 miles an hour here, and I was here in 20 minutes. And there's 6 fire departments here, and the building was gone. We've had state fire, state police, fire investigation team out here for 10 hours. We had the town out here. I've been through this place over the past 10 days with half a dozen insurance people, and there's no cause of origin. Nobody knows what happened.
Nobody can find anything.
Nobody can figure it out. They know it started in the kitchen. I mean, if I was a betting man, because this is an old building that had been here, since the early 1900s, and, some stuff had been renovated, but some stuff hadn't, is probably a rodent that chewed through a wire or, did something like that. Because, the team that's here cares so much about this place too. I mean, we've like attracted these, ragtag industry people who had worked in these other places, and they're like, this is not for me. I don't want to do this grind every single night. I don't want to be, figuring out how to modify people's burgers, like, over and over again. Or event people that were like, I like the fact that like I can shine for 6 months out of the year, and then the rest of the time I can kind of like have my life. It's like that seasonal restaurant life of running places in Nantucket.
And but it also means something to the people in Groton, right? And I think that's a huge part of this story too.
The biggest thing that's ironic right now is I've spent probably the past, I don't know, 20 years of my life running away from this town, just like trying to be as far away from like, where you grew up, and seeing the same folks over and over again, and everybody knowing your business, and there being this town gossip, and like basically been mainlining that all this week in the best ways possible. Just, some stuff. I mean, the first day was pretty raw. There were people driving up who were kind of, rubbernecking, and they wanted to gawk at it. But I think it's because it meant so much to so many people. I mean, 30 years in restaurants it's more than a
Unheard of.
lifetime, right?
Unheard of.
I mean, it had sort of, because it was the anti-restaurant. That was the thing that made this place so special, is that you were going to a place where there was no menu. Like, there was a menu, but you couldn't order off of it. It was just, this is what you're getting. And for the longest part of it, it was BYOB. So we had this whole clientele of people who had amazing wine cellars, and they wanted a place where they could drink it and just have food that went well with it. There are, kids I went to high school with who worked here with me. I mean, their first serving job was like this, cobbled together group of high school kids, like serving, investment bankers, who lived in town, but I mean, we held, the local high school I went to would have like their teacher appreciation party here every year. There's 2 private schools in this town that would hold offsite meetings. And that's even before you get into the amount of people who have memories of this place because it's where they got married. The people who got married here this past weekend, which was this whole thing of finding new locations for the ceremony, for the reception, like everything. We just called them to ask, how everything was, and they were at a tattoo parlor getting matching herb tattoos.
Oh my God. That's unbelievable. So you got the call, you drove out, you obviously saw what was happening, that the building was on fire. And I mean, there's no fucking playbook for this stuff, right? Like, it's not like, oh, okay, hold on, let me open my manual to where my restaurant burns down and go to page, 67 Appendix C to figure out where to start. How did you even begin to kind of put the pieces together?
I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I was like, if you're any good at business, the first thing you do is you detach emotion from it, and you try to figure out how to be the smartest you can about what happens now. And I think for us, it was like immediately like, we have a wedding tonight. Like, it was Sunday, September 1st.
You had one booked that night.
We had one booked that night that, like, the food was on fire. Like, we didn't have anything for them. And so, we immediately talked to all of our contacts in town and the amazing folks at the Groton Inn, which is this other historic building, which also had a fire like a number of years ago. And that was how it became sort of what it became. They were like, we got you. Like, and they found a place to put the guests that night. They made sure that they got the food as close as they could. Other restaurants in town donated their product from the restaurant for these folks. And like, they would be like, sorry, we're out of the salmon tonight because the, wedding that was supposed to be at the Lyceum needs it.
And that's like hospitality community. That's why, that's just one of the myriad of examples of why this industry is so special.
Yeah. And even that, like, the next day, the people who own the Groton Inn called me, and they were like, what else can we do? Do you need a tent? Do you need places for more weddings? Like, how is this going to go? And so, I'd say that the first 24 hours was probably the most exhausting, because not only are you dealing with like watching what might as well be a loved one die in front of you, you have to then be like, all right, I want to just say, leave me alone. Let me deal with this. Let me just deal with, picking up the pieces and sifting through the ashes. But, we had people who had waited a year plus for their wedding to be at this space. One of the things that is definitely the silver lining here is everything else on the property is untouched. Like, where we ended up having the weddings, the receptions for the past few years, the greenhouse, we had it tiled, it's still got farm tables and chairs in it. Like, it's untouched. It's ready to go. Like, the grounds are still beautiful. The fire didn't even touch the landscaping. And so what we've been doing is, we sit down with basically every wedding couple now, and we say, would you be okay still being married here, despite the fact that there's this building that is an eyesore? So we wrapped the building with a bunch of scrim, trying to just make sure that you can't access it, and B, you can't really see it that much.
Yeah.
Some folks have been okay with that, others have not. We had a couple in the center of town who were like, please use our yard. We're away this weekend. And they have this like beautiful rolling backyard with a huge lawn next to their barn that overlooks, Gibbet Hill in town, this beautiful, untouched, undeveloped land. And, the wedding guests were like, you wouldn't know that you weren't playing on your own home turf, because the team here is so good that they just made this wedding happen out of absolutely nothing. So like that adrenaline rush of like how hospitality people operate, where like in the immediate circumstances of like, oh my God, we're totally fucked. What do we do now? Like that's when we get our most creative. Like, you could just sit there and put your hands underneath your ass and be like, I don't want to do this. This is too stressful. This is too hard. But like, we're only as good as the last couple who could say that they had a great wedding here. And if our reputation of years, 30 years of building this into whatever it is now, it could be undone by us just saying, give us some time to mourn. So in some ways it helps with the mourning process of it, that you're just like, I just don't have time to stop and think about it. I have to go. And then at other points, we're trying to just protect our reputation. We're trying to be on the same level of how amazing the support has been too. When people are willing to bend over backwards and figure out any way to offer assistance or to help you or to, take some of the load off, what good would it be if we just said, no, thanks, we're just going to sit here and cry about it? Like, we've done this for long enough, you and I, in so many different iterations of restaurants, that even on your worst day, you still have to be the best version of yourself. And I think that's incredibly hard to do. And there are not that many industries where that is the case, especially not ones where, people are going to be able to remember it, sometimes it just full, close up shop and that's it. Adios. See ya.
And you've also, not for any lack of hard work or intent, or thoughtfulness, you have developed a team of people around you, because there are other restaurants and we can get into some of that. But, you really have, I think, in my opinion, over the last 10 years, built yourself a pretty awesome little empire. And that comes by virtue of other people who believe as well, right? And other people who don't just show up, but who come to the table ready to roll up their sleeves in a situation like this, ready to kind of shift their priority list and like get in there with you. What has it been like with the team to kind of lead them in this moment?
I think the thing about having one restaurant is that you feel like everything in your world revolves around that one place. When you make the leap to go from having one restaurant to having a couple restaurants, or in our case, 7, now 8, whatever it might be, considering how you want to cut up the pie. Some of them share spaces, so it's a little complicated. But I think one of the things that has been so different is that like your orbit is no longer around you. Your orbit is no longer around one physical place. Your orbit is now all of these people who work for you in all of these places, and they are what are the extensions of what you care about and what your ethos is, what your standards are, what your level of hospitality is. And I think that that's become really hard to dial in and then to get right, but it also provides this amazing opportunity where people are making memories at your places that you might never meet. And the only way for you to either have some sort of ego in that or to at all be humbled by that is to be able to understand that it's not about you. It's about what all of the people who make up your team create for the guest experience. And whether it's out here when these folks who they're dealing with wedding guests for up to a year. I mean, when we're in restaurants, there's a chance that we could have somebody dine and never even see their face and never even see them again, right? Because we're in the kitchen, or maybe we're in one of the other restaurants or whatever it might be. There's this part of running, places when you have multiple restaurants where it feels so impersonal, but the only way to make it feel personal is for all of your team to be representing your values. And I think it's so humbling, and it's so amazing to watch them do that day in and day out. Now you also have to deal with the fact that you can't control everything. That's the number one thing I tell people, and they're like, what's the hardest thing about going from one restaurant to two? And I was like, you can't control everything. And they're like, well, what's the hardest thing about going from 2 restaurants to 5? And I was like, that you still can't control everything. And I think that makes it challenging, but like I said, sometimes you have to deal with disgruntled folks who didn't enjoy it, and you can do the part that we are really good at, which is recovery. Now you're talking to somebody and you're saying, well, what could we have done better? What would have made your experience better? Or I'm terribly sorry that happened. Let me see what we can do to make this right for you. And then there's some people that you're like, I hope I never see that person ever again. And every single one of those people makes up our revenue stream. The best people who come back every single week, who have their events with you, who share memories with you, who are there to help you pick up the pieces, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the worst people that you've ever met in your entire life. Every single one of those people makes up our bottom line.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really hard. And that's what I try to tell young cooks is, I'm like, that person who sent that dish back that you worked really hard about, if you were proud of it, I'm proud of it, the staff is proud of it, then that's on them, right?
Yeah.
Suck it up. There's many more people that are going to like that. You're not going to figure it all out in one dish and in one guest.
Yeah, and it's interesting because one of the things that you put down on your sheet when I had asked about some things that you wanted to talk about was, and it was actually the first one on your list, was, our restaurant sustainable at this point? And now I think it's interesting to look at that question in terms of what you've experienced the past 10 days, because you made a very bold statement on social media after the fire saying that we will be back, and we will be back better than ever. And I want you to kind of tell us a little bit about that, just determination, right, in the face of like an industry right now that is in itself just so wrought with, rocks in the middle of the harbor for the ship to navigate. And here you are, right, saying to yourself and everybody else, like, well, this ain't the end. We're doing this again, everybody.
Yeah. I mean, if I had figured out when to quit, I would have gotten out of this business a long time ago. I mean, I think, we're forged, for better or for worse, in a fire of stubbornness, relentlessness, and maybe the occasional bad decision that, you figure out how to turn into a good one. But, I think that there's something that's it's powerful, where it seems like this is a summation of more people than just me. Right. And so, like, I could sit here and say, all right, well, you know what, shit luck, it's done. Like, let's just move on and go to something that might be more profitable or might be better use of our time or whatnot. But then that's like, entire legacy that you sort of leave behind. That's all these people who fought to protect this place and make it special. You have to honor that to an extent. Now, I mean, there's still going to be a reality. I mean, we're looking at an insurance policy where we're probably going to be underinsured by an exponential amount. And the last time that this building was renovated was in 1990, and building codes have changed since then. Costs of materials have changed since then. Everything that we would need to put back is going to be wildly different. But at the same time, I mean, building restaurants is just what we do now. I mean, it's become the most rewarding feeling when you watch a piece of dirt go from that into, a building that is full of people enjoying themselves, a team that's, offering amazing hospitality and food. And if you do it right, makes a buck.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of how I look at this, is like, well, this is what we do. Like, there's nobody suited better to do this than us. We know. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. No, is I mean, I guess if there is one, the only silver lining in something like this, and a moment as kind of tragic as this, is that it does give you that space to kind of think about how you're doing business and what you're doing there. And I'm just wondering if you've even had any ability to stop and think about what might change given this new opportunity that's in front of you to rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like the sharks can't stop swimming, scenario here where, you just kind of have to keep pushing forward because if you take too much time to kind of stop and think about it, like you're going to give yourself reasons not to keep going, right? I mean, like the moment anybody takes a breath in the middle of a marathon, you might be thinking, all right, maybe I'm going to stop running.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'll have a little sit down right now. But if you want to finish a marathon, you have to kind of keep powering through. And
I wouldn't know. I
and so,
haven't run one, but I
do
trust
I
you.
look like I run
trust
marathons? We've been running marathons for our entire career, Matt. They're
mental
just not
mental marathons.
they're
Yeah.
mental marathons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's another part of it too, where you have to kind of look at like what have I learned from this space? Like if you I think it's the same way if somebody decides to close a restaurant and put something new in that same location, that you're like, well, am I going to make all the same mistakes? Am I
Mhm.
going to, or am I going to build something here that is a culmination of all the mistakes that I've learned and all the triumphs that I've had? And not all of those things are going to equate perfectly into what you rebuild, but they, at the very least, are going to give you a better pathway. When we were figuring this out before, it was like, here's this thing and we have no money to do anything different with it. So let's just extract whatever we can with whatever we know. And that's, it's half of running restaurants.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you walk into a space that somebody else designed and you're like, well, let's see if what I do here could make that run better. I mean, our first restaurant, Puritan and Company, was a Turkish restaurant that lasted 11 months. And I walked in there and I was like, cool, we'll pull all this stuff out of here, a fresh coat of paint. We're off to the races. And I'm still peeling away 12 years later, things that I'm finding in that space. And I'm like, who would have done this? Like, why was this done this way? Yeah, I mean, so there's that part of it. And then, I think the other aspect too is like, you know, I want to figure out how to make this space special for not just, maybe 40 happy couples a year. I want to figure out a way that it's this community that has stepped up in this time when we're in need has the ability to access it. And, as I mean, like some of the best restaurants in the world have a bar of entry that are so expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, like
Yeah.
Noma is currently packing up its entire
I
kitchen
know.
and
I
its
saw that.
team to be able to go to Kyoto and then like host a festival in their
Yeah.
space. And it's like, what, maybe a handful of restaurants in the world can afford to do that through whatever
100%.
mechanisms they do. Like this needs to be a place where we figure out how to break down that bar of entry where, people are coming here and they're, grabbing a beer and hanging out on the lawn with their family,
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to be because they were, wedding guests. There's so much of this too that like I'm sure every chef and restaurant owner is sick of talking about the COVID era, but like we learned how to deal with pivoting and like having to just navigate uncertainty at a level that no one other than maybe like triage surgeons and doctors have ever had to really do. I mean, every single day it was like, is it safe to be open? Can we do this? Are we allowed to do this? Will people show up to this? Do we have the money for this? Will the government give us money for this?
And then it
Deal
changes the next day. Yep.
exactly. And I think dealing with this and an ebb and flow of what we understand about insurance companies and payouts and policies and understanding like what actually happens here moving forward. We've already done this dance before, and we got really damn good at it. I mean, we grew our group from one restaurant to 7 now during COVID, like in the post-COVID years, and
Dur-
and that became only possible because we just would not let up. We were just relentless about it.
During COVID, but also I will say that I know you, I think, fairly well, and I know you to be one of the most independent spirited entrepreneurs that I've ever met. And so you do all of this but you also do it kind of in this new world, in this like globalized world, in this world of pay to play, in this world of like big fucking money gets you big accolades bullshit. And that's not the type of person you are. And so, I think it's so interesting that, you found that success, but now you're also going to like, you're pushing further. Like, you're going to do it again in a new way that works for you and works for your group that isn't any of those things. And I think I'd love you to talk a little bit about kind of like pulling back a little bit, right, from a higher elevation and looking down on what you've built in respect to that, in respect to kind of what you're up against that's out there in the world of restaurants as it is, on top of having to now build a restaurant that burnt down.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that the past 4 years have felt a lot like the movie Uncut Gems. It's just like you were in this 10-way parlay where you're just trying to leverage like one thing that is marginally successful into something that you hope won't be a failure. And like, you're just constantly doing this like shuffle of like, we'll try this, we'll do that. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I think the growth that we had came with a remarkable amount of growing pains. I mean, even just HR, yeah, I mean, like, I think the point, like, there are times where, like, the only time I know that someone's name or that they've been hired is getting their onboarding information CC'd to me, like, in a thread, and that became this very impersonal thing where I would walk in there and, like, somebody would be like, who is this guy, behind the counter of Cafe Beatrice? Like, is this guy our accountant? And they're like, no, he owns it. And they're like, oh, sorry, I had no idea. So there was like parts of that just were this like, kind of like, you just kind of sit down and you're like, wow, like people don't know that I'm their boss, that part felt really good. So the HR thing got kind of hard, a couple of things that burned us, during that time too, the best, making the best opportunities to kind of like find people. There's a lot of, I always joke about this, like, I always feel like we're square pegging round holes, like
just hit it as hard as I can, yeah, it'll go in.
And that's sort of a double entendre in a lot of ways right there too. But I mean, like, like there was so many times where we were just like, we got so good at putting our head down and running through walls that we were like, do we even need to run through this wall? Like,
right.
Why do we have, we have one restaurant complex that has 3 different restaurants in it, and 3 restaurants had 3 completely separate menus with no overlap because everybody wanted something different in all of those spaces. And we're like, this is stupid. Like, this is just creating, now we're spending so much more money on labor, and, there's lost product because people aren't inventorying it the right way. So there was a lot of that had to get there. I think the thing that has been actually the hardest though is menu writing, because all of these things were, for better or for worse, my ideas. And I say that knowing the good and the bad of owning that. Every single restaurant that we've opened was an idea of mine. The team put their heads together, but like, we don't have this like amazing, sushi restaurant that's in our portfolio because we had like the best sushi guy working for us. Like every single one of these is sort of an extension of me, and that's good and bad. There's parts of it where I feel very personally attached to things that are on the menu. And so if they aren't selling, taking them off feels personal. If there are things that are on the menu that the staff doesn't like to deal with, but like, that they're money makers, you have to figure out how to explain that to them. And then when you have to do a seasonal menu change, it is like turning a cruise ship around in a very tiny harbor. Yeah. Like every single thing that we have to do.
And you guys are hyper seasonal in all that you do.
Yeah. And like we're changing the menus, a tasting menu at Puritan and Company changes every 2 weeks. And working on that, the actual, dinner menu in there, 4 times a year, but in 4 times a year at that one restaurant, I've had 4 chefs during that time.
That's the world we live in right now.
And that's the world we live in. And I think what's been really hard is, a lot of people have started to do the mental calculus as to whether or not it makes any sense to make any money in this business or go be a social media influencer, like making, stop cut videos and trying to get YouTube channel thing happening. I tell you, I've watched a lot of them driving around in G-Wagons, putting up 7 videos a week rather than putting in 70 hours a week of like grueling hot kitchen labor.
Right.
I get it. I mean, I don't know what it would have been like if those opportunities existed, when I was, in my 20s. I can't imagine that I wouldn't have been like, all right, I've got a decent personality. Like I can be on camera. I can talk to people. I can educate people. I can have fun, and I get nights and weekends off, and I'm just making content. Like the only thing that stops me from doing that right now is what we've already built. I'm too proud of, or I'm too indebted into, whether it be personally or financially. But also like, I just don't think I know enough about that world, and I'm too old to learn how to do anything different.
It also probably wouldn't fill your soul. So there's that.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't. I mean, I think that, I those opportunities excite me every once in a while, but I'm proud of what I've built, and I didn't just build it for me, even though, I just got done saying that all of these restaurants, are sort of an extension of me. But, the core team that's been with us has been with us for this whole time that we've been building these things.
Yeah.
I'd say Puritan Company was my training wheels of 7 years of figuring out how to not close a restaurant. And then I've had all these years after that where I've been like, let's take everything that you figured out of, like, call it grad school of learning how to do that and apply it to more properties, And I've gotten better at negotiating leases. I've gotten better at asking for the right amount of TI. I've gotten better of knowing when to say no to things that come across our plate.
Yep.
And that came from really relying on friends like yourself to ask questions of, to, bounce ideas off of, but also to understand a little bit more about, like, what do I want out of this? Like, growth is great, but like, if you're just going to be, every single day pushing your boulder to the top of the hill, I mean, there's a Sisyphus nature to everything that we do in this business.
Yeah.
But if every single thing that we do is, constantly rolling back down, how much energy do you have to keep rolling that through? And are you going to have time to spend with your family, with your friends, your mental and physical health? I mean, those are all parts of this that, like, I talk to my therapist about all the time.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're there for. That's what they're there for. What is your one guilty pleasure for $20 or less?
Oh, I'd say, like, on the fast food side of things, and this is going to be one that probably no one will ever say before, is, and I think they still have it on the menu, the breakfast burritos that they have at McDonald's. I don't know why, but for some reason it hits. It hits. Yeah. But I'd say, like, probably more on, like, the realistic side of things, like, a plain croissant from somebody who really knows how to make a plain croissant is, like, hits on a level, and I would pay $20 if it was a good croissant.
Well, and you're spoiled because you've got one of the best pastry chefs in the game.
Who hates making plain croissants, but I make him do it every once in a while because I love him.
All right. So that's one. The next one, become a little bit more business centric. So who is the one person that you've hired that has transformed your business?
It's really hard to narrow it down to one. I'd say, other than my therapist, our director of operations, Jared Sadowin, he joined our company at a time when we were kind of coming out of COVID and we didn't really have a game plan. And my business partner, Min, who at the time was working for Toast, now works for Square, he's like, we need somebody who thinks about the IT side of things. Mm-hmm. And I think that the IT side of things has been one of the most beneficial parts to our growth. Every single one of our restaurants is connected through Basecamp. I mean, similar to Slack in that sense, but he used his time in the first year that he was with us to clean up a lot of things that were messy and also to build up our tech stack. And our tech stack is something that has changed the way that we approach literally everything. There's an iPad in every single one of our kitchens. And from that iPad, everybody can do everything from accessing every recipe in the company to placing every order that they need to messaging somebody if they really need something, and then checking their own schedule in 7 shifts. So like all of those things are all in a single iPad wall mounted in every kitchen. And that has just made it so that there's not a single out of date recipe anywhere.
That's amazing.
You know,
That's
that kind
amazing.
of stuff has changed
I love
our
that.
growth.
I love that. Okay. What is the one tool that you use every day? And it could be anything.
I'd say the one tool that we use every single day is it's just got to be your phone, man. I mean, I hate this thing. I hate it. But like
I'm with you.
like,
I'm with you.
In 20 minutes, you know, I can check the guest counts of every single restaurant, review all of the guests that are coming in every single place, check it for names. I can pull up files that I need. I can take a photo of food and post it to social media. I can make a plea and ask people to help donate for a burned down restaurant. I mean, all of those things can be done from this hell box that lives in my pocket that never stops buzzing and ringing. So yeah, that's the most important tool in a modern day restaurateur's,
and you can
arsenal.
send inappropriate texts to all your friends, which
exactly and memorialize it
on occasion. I'm privy to.
Yes, exactly. And if they ever make an iPhone model where I can make it self-destruct like it does in Mission Impossible, then probably even better.
All right. Last question is, what is the first thing that you do when you get out of bed in the morning?
If the kids are up, it's go hang out with the kiddos for a little while. If they're not up, it's make a cup of coffee and sit at my dining room table in complete silence. I think that there's something to be said about setting the tone for your own day. And I think if you start your day with chaos, which I've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old that, I'm sure when I get to the teen years like you're dealing with, I'll have a completely different perspective on this.
Whole nother world. You know what I'm doing this weekend? I'm helping him study for driver's ed. If that gives you any. Yeah, that's where we're at.
Just give me agita right there.
That's where we're at.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that it's really important that like if you can give yourself a little bit of peace before you start dealing with the onslaught of chaos, it sets you up right. I also fly off the handle when somebody interrupts my peace like that, with the kid running in hot and, throwing a toy at the other kid's head and first thing in the morning. But, I think it's the first thing I do. I try not to have the first thing I do be checking my phone, combating that last thing we just talked about.